On this Tuesday night, wildfires displacing people and polluting the air. A state of emergency declared in BC as fast-moving flames force hundreds to leave everything behind.
We have reached a critical point. Get an evacuation plan ready.
And the plumes of smoke reducing air quality across big parts of the country. What emails reveal about the COVID-19 emergency plan at an Ontario care home where dozens of residents died. A Global News investigation. Don't go, Americans told to avoid the UK as COVID cases there spike. And Billionaire's space race. What's the point of Jeff Bezos' 11-minute rocket ride? And should the rich focus instead on helping planet Earth?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Holy This is the reality of what crews on the front lines in BC are facing. This video was taken by firefighters in the heart of BC's wine country. In just a few hours last night, a fast-moving wildfire exploded. Hundreds of properties have been evacuated. The mayor of one Okanagan town is urging vacationers to pack up and go home. Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are tracking a number of fires from BC to Ontario tonight. We begin, though, in BC, where the situation is volatile, the weather forecast worrying, and now the province has declared a state of emergency. It takes effect at midnight tonight.
This will address the potential for a mass evacuation scenario and provide our government with the means to secure the accommodation spaces necessary to support evacuees.
Here's the big picture. Across BC, there are more than 290 active fires now. 87 are out of control. 37 are considered wildfires of note, meaning they pose a potential threat to public safety. This is what it looks like right now in BC's South Okanagan, where one of the most concerning fires is burning. This is the view from Osoyoos. The smoke you see is from the aggressive Inkameep Creek fire. Yesterday, it was estimated at 300 hectares. Now it's grown to 2,000 hectares. Global's Klaudia Van Emmerik is in Osoyoos tonight. Klaudia, set the scene for us.
Donna, thank you. This fire is an aggressive one. It is a fast-moving one. You can see behind me a massive plume of smoke. There is visible flame on the hillside, and the winds are pushing this fire in a southerly direction towards the northern part of Osoyoos. Now, there are evacuation alerts and orders in place for hundreds of properties between the towns of Oliver and Osoyoos. About 250 properties on order, 150 on alert. And there are local states of emergencies issued by multiple local governments here. Now, a major evacuation effort that took place overnight and early this morning was across Osoyoos Lake at the Spirit Ridge Resort, which is very popular and usually filled to capacity during the summer months. So vacationers there were told to flee overnight, as were tourists in the adjacent campground, the Inkameep campground, affecting about 1,000 tourists.
We got knocks on the door at about 5 o'clock this morning that, the fire department was there and whatnot, and they were telling us to just gather our things as quickly as we could and start making our way out of the park.
We're just on pins and needles, and we're not even at the end of July. I'm sure happy to see the support services, the fire department's been out there, BC Wild Services, the planes are flying. I mean, everybody's putting everything they can into stopping this fire, controlling it.
Now, the mayor of Osoyoos is strongly urging the tourists that are here to simply pack up and go home, because not only is this fire inching closer to town, but there is no room to house all the vacationers. Now, as for this firefight, the BC Wildfire Service is throwing in extra resources to fight it from the ground and from the air. But at this point, Donna, it is still very much out of control.
Deeply worrying situation. Klaudia Van Emmerik in Osoyoos, BC, thanks. BC isn't the only province dealing with an early and aggressive wildfire season. This is the picture across the country today. The red dots are fires burning out of control. Dozens of them are in Saskatchewan. That province has recorded more than 420 fires so far this year. That is roughly double the 5-year average for this time of 214. Ontario also has had higher than average fires, 735 so far. Last year, there were 421 by mid-July. All that smoke is having a major impact on air quality, far from where the fires are burning. This forecast map from Fire Smoke Canada shows how the smoke is spreading across large parts of Canada and into the U.S. Communities from BC to New Brunswick are now under air quality alerts. This is what it looked like in Toronto today. Once again, that city was ranked one of the worst in the world for air quality. Eric Sorensen explains what the air quality alerts mean and why we can expect more of them because of the changing climate.
First it was the wildfires, now it's the smoke. With a boost from Canada's prevailing winds, smoky air is spreading from Western Canada all the way to New Brunswick. In some BC communities, smoke is making it harder to fight the wildfires. In Manitoba, Environment Canada has issued an air quality advisory for much of the province, including Winnipeg. The hazy air is now being inhaled by millions of Canadians as it wafts over large cities like Calgary.
It bothers the sinuses a little bit because there's so much smoke in the air.
Winds from northwestern Ontario have spread smoke more than 1,000 kilometers south into the country's largest urban area, Toronto.
People in northwestern Ontario have to live with this all the time because they are right in the middle of fire season. It seems so far away for southern Ontarians. They don't affect us, but they do.
For most of this summer, downtown Toronto's Air Quality Health Index registered as low risk. But last evening, for about 3 hours, it was high risk, bordering on very high risk. This afternoon, it is back to moderate risk. The concern going forward is whether there will be increasingly more days like this in the future. Scientists say a big city like Toronto is a large emission source for air pollutants at any time. Wildfire smoke only makes it worse.
Wildfires are definitely a dominant contributor to the poor air quality we're seeing throughout the country. Studies over Canada have shown that with climate change, we expect the potential for uncontrollable fires doubling in the areas that we're seeing fires currently.
Those with respiratory conditions are at risk when air quality is bad, and doctors expect the risk to rise as the climate warms and wildfires occur more often.
We see an immediate uptick in asthma exacerbations of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and we also see an increase in other inflammatory conditions, so heart attacks, strokes. We also know that what we're seeing today is not the new normal. We know that things are just getting worse.
In southern Ontario, rain in the forecast should offer some relief, but in large swaths of western and northern Canada, the wildfire season and the smoke it brings is far from over. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Newly obtained emails from Toronto Public Health suggest a long-term care home, which had the deadliest COVID-19 outbreak in Ontario, ignored advice that could have helped save lives. More than 300 residents and staff at Tender Care Living Centre tested positive for COVID. 81 residents died. Tonight, Carolyn Jarvis has the details of the advice that was not followed.
For months, Tender Care Living Centre had an outbreak plan in place. Use a vacant wing of its 4th floor to isolate residents who tested positive for COVID-19. But when COVID struck on December 4th, the 4th floor wasn't used. Internal emails from Toronto Public Health obtained by Global News suggest Tender Care changed course only days into the outbreak, saying the 4th floor was not appropriate for a variety of reasons, such as no call bells and no curtains. According to the emails written in April, Toronto Public Health and Scarborough Health Network suggested a seemingly simple solution: baby monitors for no call bells and room dividers for the lack of curtains. But, Toronto Public Health wrote, these suggestions were not agreed upon by the facility.
The fact that Tender Care had a 4th floor wing that was left vacant and not utilized, and there was no emergency plan for how to handle this crisis when they had the first wave to figure it out and come up with said plan, is completely inexcusable and entirely unforgivable.
Neither Tender Care nor its management company Extendicare would answer questions about the Toronto Public Health emails that say the home rejected advice to use baby monitors and room dividers. Extendicare says the region was overwhelmed with COVID cases and there were no staffing resources available to open the unit. That response isn't enough for those who lost their loved ones at Tender Care, like Reed Zhao, whose grandmother died of COVID.
I feel anger and frustrated, of course. It's not only the lack of arrangement for the 4th floor missing baby monitors. And at the height of the outbreak, they should have called in support from the Red Cross, from the Canadian Armed Force. There are things they could do.
The Ontario government has apologized for the impact of the pandemic on long-term care homes and says new legislation is coming this fall. Carolyn Jarvis, Global News, Toronto.
The COVID concerns overshadowing the Olympics. Coming up, Tokyo 2020 organizers watch the rising case numbers and say it's still possible to call things off. The Tokyo Olympics officially kick off with the opening ceremonies on Friday, but there will be no cheering crowds. Few in Japan are celebrating, and it's still possible events could be canceled. Mike Armstrong reports.
These were supposed to be the recovery Olympics. When the Games were awarded to Japan, the country was still reeling from the 2011 tsunami. Now, instead of excitement and bustling streets, COVID has many questioning if the Games should be happening at all. This man says there's no recovery. It feels like the Olympics themselves aren't in the mood for the Olympics. There is a rigid testing program in place for athletes and delegations. As of Tuesday, the IOC says 67 people accredited for the Games have tested positive for COVID-19. When the Games CEO was asked Tuesday if they could still be canceled, he said he couldn't predict what's going to happen to the number of cases, but that there would be discussions if there's a spike. Now, for the athletes, these Games aren't what they're used to. The social aspect is taking a hit. These will be Canadian swimmer Yuri Kissel's second Olympics.
It's definitely a little different for sure. You can't run up to friends and stuff you see on other teams and give them a hug.
It didn't take us by surprise.
Canadian softball pitcher Lauren Regula is competing in her third Games. She says the team's tested daily and that there are restrictions that keep them to their bubble.
We're sticking to ourselves and, we eat in the same place.
Good afternoon, ladies and
Now, some of the restrictions are creating frustrations for the media. Just about all they can see of Tokyo is in what's billed as an out-of-the-bubble bus trip.
Well, it's good to have something out of the bubble.
These trips are another thing some are using to argue the Olympic bubble is broken. Tokyo is officially under a state of emergency, and residents are being told to stay at home. Yet every day, Japanese media covers cases of visitors interacting with locals.
Of course, they are supposed to be within the bubble, but, it's not working well.
The public's confidence in these Games is suffering. A poll this week found 55% of the country is against holding these Olympics. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
The U.S. State Department and Centers for Disease Control have issued a warning to Americans about the UK. The U.S. has raised the warning to the highest level, level 4, telling Americans to avoid travel to the United Kingdom because there is a very high level of COVID-19 there. The CDC says if you must travel to the UK, make sure you are fully vaccinated, but it warns there is still the potential to get sick. In India, the number of people who have died from COVID-19 may be nearly 10 times higher than the official death toll. A new study by the U.S.-based Center for Global Development estimates excess deaths, that's the gap between those recorded and those that would have been expected, is between 3 and 4.7 million. Officially, India is reporting more than 414,000 people died from COVID. It's believed overwhelmed hospitals may have missed recording many deaths. In the U.S., there was a fiery exchange today between Dr. Anthony Fauci and Republican Senator Rand Paul. Fauci, the top infectious disease expert in the U.S., denied he lied to Congress about U.S. funding what's called gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Virology Lab in China. Research Rand Paul claims increased the transmissibility of viruses and resulted in the deaths of millions of people. This was Fauci's reaction.
Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly, and I want to say that officially. And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
I had one-on-one with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, what he says about accountability for Indigenous children harmed by the residential school system. It's likely there will be a federal election soon, and we now know one prominent person who won't be running. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, told the Canadian press he is not going to run. There was much speculation Carney would turn to politics, but he says he's committed to helping organize the private financial sector ahead of November's UN climate conference. He says he doesn't rule out running at some point in the future and says he supports Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Farah Nasser sat down with Trudeau to talk about election planning while the country faces a reckoning over residential schools.
You've been traveling quite a bit recently. A lot of people say you're campaigning.
This is what summer looks like for a politician, to get out there and meet with people, especially after a pandemic, where we've been working really hard to support people, to have people's backs through the pandemic, and now people are expecting us to be part of building back better.
So are you not meeting with advisors, talking about an election, calling your staff back from Ottawa?
In a minority government, there's always times where we have to be ready for whatever comes, but we're focused on continuing to deliver for Canadians every step of the way.
I want to focus right now on Islamophobia. The National Council of Canadian Muslims says since the London terror attack, there has been a violent incident against a Muslim every day. Why Canada? Why do you think that's happening here?
We are seeing a rise of hatred, a rise of intolerance, fed in some places by populism and by politics of division.
What about policy, though, Prime Minister? I mean, you represent the riding of Papineau. It's such a diverse riding, but there are people in your riding who feel like you're not standing up to for them when it comes to Bill 21. Do you honestly feel like you're doing the best in your power to stand up for those people?
Okay, first of all, let me be very clear.
Okay.
I am opposed to that law, and everybody in Papineau, most people across the country know that I am in total disagreement with Bill 21. I don't think it's for any government, particularly in a country that values rights and liberties, to dictate to a woman what she can and cannot wear. I think that's just wrong. However, we have a justice system that is set up so that individuals can take their governments to court.
Do you think it's racist?
I think it is. I think it's the wrong thing to be doing. I do not think it goes in the right direction. But
I want to move on to residential schools, because this has been a reckoning, as you know, across Canada. But, you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission spent 5 years getting testimony from these survivors, and now we have these possible crime scenes in multiple provinces, yet virtually no one has been held accountable for what's happened
you said,
in these.
And now we have these crime scenes. No, those crime scenes have been there for generations, and we've known about them for generations, and Indigenous peoples have known about them for generations.
What about accountability, Prime Minister? What about the criminal charges? Nobody's being charged. Would you like to see that? Would you like to see criminal accountability?
What I want to see is secondary to what the communities need.
But would you support one?
Yes, absolutely. I will support anything that families need to move forward, because you have to remember that even as Indigenous kids were being told that they had no worth, they had no value in those residential schools, in every other school in Canada, kids were being told, non-Indigenous kids were being told, that Indigenous communities had no worth, had no value. So reconciliation isn't just about Indigenous people and the government.
Right.
It's about all of us, and we all have a role to play.
Okay, Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, Farah.
You can watch Farah's full interview with the Prime Minister on our website, globalnews.ca/globalnational. Next, the woman who waited decades to defy gravity. For the second time this month, a multi-billionaire has made it to the edge of space in his rocket. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos flew 107 kilometers above the Earth's surface and lived to tell the tale. And he brought 3 people with him, including 82-year-old Wally Funk, an accomplished pilot. She's one of 13 women who, thanks to private funding, volunteered to undergo astronaut training in the 1960s. She excelled at it, but the training was canceled and the women were excluded from NASA's space program. Funk has waited 6 decades for this moment.
I've been waiting a long time to finally get it up there, and I've done a lot of astronaut training through the world, and I could always beat the guys on what they were doing because I was always stronger, and I've always done everything on my own. It was wonderful. I want to go again fast.
Jackson Prosco looks at billionaires and their rockets and whether the money could be better spent here on Earth.
This might be the most important delivery Jeff Bezos has ever completed.
A gentle drop-off in the Texas desert after a ride to the edge of space.
My expectations were high and they were dramatically exceeded.
Beautiful, just beautiful. 52 years to the day after humans first walked on the moon, Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket roared into the sky, making history by carrying both the oldest and youngest passengers into the record books. 18-year-old Oliver Damon of the Netherlands and 82-year-old Wally Funk finally getting her glimpse of space up close.
I loved every minute of it. I just wish it had been a little longer.
All told, the crew experienced about 4 minutes of weightlessness, while the world's richest man became the latest billionaire to stake a claim to space, joining the ranks of Richard Branson and Elon Musk.
I want to thank every Amazon employee and every Amazon customer, because you guys paid for all of this.
Bezos sees space tourism as a path to space exploration. It's also a lucrative business, catering to the ultra-wealthy. The company claims to have sold $100 million worth of tickets for future launches at an undisclosed price per seat.
The price is going to be set by the market demand. So right now, the only data point we have is that somebody was willing to pay $28 million for the first Blue Origin ticket.
For that price, a lucky few can now see the world the way only a few hundred people ever have. A perspective past astronauts have described as life-changing.
If you go into space and see how fragile it is, you'll want to take care of it even more.
Like his fellow space billionaires, Bezos has big dreams to one day explore the moon and beyond. Back on planet Earth, these baby steps are for now all about the business of space tourism. One small step for those who can afford it. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the sunset at Remick Rapids Park in Ottawa. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.